What would you do if your husband decided to divorce you after winning $7 million because you nagged him for 2 years to get a real job? It was a bright morning in the small neighborhood where David and Ruth lived with their 2 children. The sun peeked through the old, faded curtains of their tiny apartment, casting a soft glow on the worn-out furniture. The place wasn't much, but it was home, and they had built a life together in it. David had once been a proud man, a university graduate who had worked as an accountant in a reputable firm. But that was years ago. He had lost his job due to downsizing, and since then, things had never been the same. At first, he tried looking for another job, sending out applications and attending interviews, but nothing worked out. As the months passed, his efforts slowed down, and he began spending more time at home, convinced that a man of his status shouldn't take just any job. Ruth, on the other hand, had no such pride. She had always been hard-working, determined to keep her family afloat. She worked as a cashier at a supermarket during the day and cleaned offices at night. It was exhausting, but she did it because there was no other choice. That morning, as she rushed to get ready for work, she glanced at David, who was seated on the couch, flipping through an old newspaper. He had been sitting in the same spot for hours, just like he did every day. "David," she called gently as she adjusted her uniform. "Have you tried looking for anything today?" David sighed, not taking his eyes off the newspaper. "Ruth, I keep telling you, I can't just take any job. I have a degree. I have standards." Ruth paused, pressing her lips together. She had heard this countless times before. "David, we don't have time for standards," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The bills don't care about your degree. The children need food, rent is due, and I can't do this alone forever." David folded the newspaper and leaned back against the couch. "You're acting like I don't want to work. I just haven't found the right opportunity yet." "The right opportunity?" Ruth let out a humorless laugh. "David, it's been 2 years. 2 years, and you've not found one single opportunity that fits your standards?" David frowned. "Why are you making it sound like I'm lazy?" "Because you are," Ruth snapped before taking a deep breath. She didn't want to argue. She was too tired for that. "David, please, just take something, anything, even if it's temporary, just help me." Davy didn't respond. He only shook his head, picked up the remote, and turned on the television. Ruth swallowed the lump in her throat. "I have to go," she muttered, grabbing her bag. She kissed their 2 children on their foreheads before stepping out. The moment she closed the door, she let out a deep breath, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall. As Ruth walked down the street to catch a bus, her mind was filled with frustration and sadness. She loved David, but love alone couldn't put food on the table. The long hours at work drained her, but she had no choice. She worked hard, sometimes pulling double shifts, sometimes skipping meals so that their children could eat. But what hurt her most wasn't the exhaustion. It was the fact that the man she married, the man she once admired, had given up on trying. That evening, when Ruth returned home, her body ached all over. She was exhausted from standing on her feet all day, and her second job awaited her in just a few hours. As she entered the house, the sight before her made her heart sink. David was exactly where she had left him, this time with the television on, watching a football match. "You're back," he said casually without looking away from the screen. Ruth dropped her bag and stared at him. "David, did you step out today? Did you check for jobs?" David sighed, rubbing his temples. "Ruth, not this again." "Yes, this again," she fired back. "David, I need you to do something, anything, even if it's just for now." He turned to her, irritation flashing in his eyes. "You don't understand. I worked hard to get my degree. I can't just throw that away and take any random job." "Random job?" Ruth scoffed, shaking her head. "David, I know a man with a degree who is driving a taxi just to put food on the table. I know another who works as a security guard at night and teaches part-time during the day. Do you think they don't have standards? But they have families to feed, and they are doing what they must." David clenched his jaw. "I'm not them. I will not lower myself like that." Ruth felt something inside her snap, Lower yourself. Is that what you think I do? Lowering myself just so you and the kids can eat." David looked away, guilt flashing across his face for a brief moment. "That's not what I meant." "But that's what you said," Ruth whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Silence stretched between them. David didn't have a response. He never did. Ruth sighed and turned away. "I'm going to change. I have another shift in an hour." As the days passed, nothing changed. David remained in the house, waiting for the right opportunity, while Ruth carried the weight of their family on her shoulders. One evening, after another long day, she returned home and found their landlord, Mr. Okafor, standing by the entrance of their building. "Ah, Ruth, welcome," he greeted, his voice serious. Her stomach tightened. "Good evening, sir. I need to talk to you about the rent," he said, glancing at her tired face. She swallowed hard. "Sir, please, just a little more time." Mr. Okafor sighed. "Ruth, I understand. You work hard, but it's been 3 months. I can't keep waiting." Tears burned in her eyes. "I promise. I'll pay. Just give me more time." He hesitated before nodding. "All right. End of the month. No more excuses." As he walked away, Ruth felt her knees go weak. She turned and entered the house, her mind racing. David was on the couch, as usual. "David?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to her, unaware of the storm inside her. "Hmm?" She stepped closer, her hands trembling. "The landlord gave us until the end of the month. If we don't pay, we're out." David's expression darkened. "He can't just kick us out." "David, stop!" Ruth shouted, surprising even herself. "Stop acting like everything is fine. It's not. I am drowning, and you're just sitting there watching." David was silent. Ruth wiped her eyes. "If you love us, if you care about this family, prove it. Stand up and do something." Then, without another word, she angrily walked to the bedroom and shut the door, leaving David alone with his thoughts. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Ruth continued pushing herself beyond her limits, making sure her children had food to eat, a roof over their heads and clothes on their backs. She didn't care about herself anymore. There was no time for that. All that mattered was keeping her family afloat, even if it meant sacrificing her own well-being. She barely had time to sleep. Every morning she left before sunrise and returned late at night. The little energy she had left was spent making sure the house was in order, ensuring the children were bathed, their homework was done, and their school fees were somehow managed. And David? He remained the same. He had gotten too comfortable being cared for, acting as if life owed him an opportunity on a silver platter. He wasn't worried about bills or responsibilities because Ruth was handling it all. She tried to be the good wife, the supportive wife. She forced herself to believe that things would change, that one day David would wake up and realize what she had been going through. But each time she hoped, he disappointed her. Sometimes, when she stood in front of the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The vibrant, beautiful woman she once was had faded. Her skin had lost its glow, dark circles formed under her tired eyes, and her body had become heavier, worn down by stress and exhaustion. One evening, after a long, grueling day at work, she had just entered the house, her feet dragging across the floor, when David, as usual, was seated comfortably on the couch, watching television. He barely acknowledged her arrival. "David!" she called, dropping her bag on the chair. He hummed in response, not looking away from the screen. She sighed, pressing her fingers against her temple. "Do you even notice me anymore?" David finally turned to her, his eyes scanning her appearance. His lips curled in mild amusement. "You've really let yourself go, Ruth. You're getting fat." Ruth felt a sharp pain in her chest, but she swallowed it down. "I had children, David. I work day and night to make sure this family survives. What do you expect?" David shrugged. "I'm just saying. You used to look better." Ruth clenched her fists at her sides, forcing herself to stay calm. She had wanted to talk about his job situation, to beg him one more time to make an effort, but what was the point? He didn't care, so she said nothing. She turned and entered the bedroom, feeling a deep sadness settle in her chest. The weeks dragged on, and Ruth continued to push through, even when her body begged her to slow down. Then one day, everything came crashing down. She had been feeling weak for a while, but she ignored it, convincing herself that she just needed more sleep. But sleep never came. There was always something to do, someone to take care of. One afternoon, while at work, her vision blurred and her legs gave out beneath her. The next thing she knew, she was on the floor, surrounded by concerned co-workers. Someone called an ambulance, and before she could protest, she was being rushed to the hospital. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on a hospital bed, an IV drip attached to her arm. A doctor stood beside her, concern etched on his face. "Ruth, you collapsed from exhaustion. Your body is shutting down because you're overworking yourself. You need rest." Ruth shook her head, panic rising in her chest. "No, doctor, I can't stay here. I have to go home. I have to work. Who will take care of my children?" The doctor sighed. "If you don't rest, you might not be able to take care of them at all. Your body needs to recover." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Doctor, I don't have anyone to cover the bills. Please, just let me go home." The doctor hesitated, but eventually gave in to her pleas. He prescribed some medication and warned her to take care of herself. Later that evening, Ruth dragged herself back home. She was still weak, her head pounding, but she had no choice. As she stepped into the house, her heart sank. David was in his usual spot, relaxed in front of the television. He turned his head slightly when he saw her. "You're back early. What happened?" Ruth stared at him in disbelief. "David, I was in the hospital," she said, her voice shaking. David frowned. "Hospital? What happened?" "I collapsed," she muttered, "from exhaustion." David clicked his tongue and turned back to the television. "You see? That's your problem, Ruth. You work too much." Ruth felt her knees go weak. She had expected worry, even a little guilt. But instead she got indifference. Her heart pounded as she walked toward him. "David, why are you like this? Why don't you care? Why do you feel so comfortable sitting here every day while I kill myself just to make sure we survive?" David sighed, looking at her as if she were disturbing him. "Nobody asked you to overwork yourself, Ruth. That's on you." The words hit her like a slap. She stumbled back, gripping the edge of the chair for support. "David, if I don't do it, who will?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. David didn't answer. Ruth let out a bitter laugh. "I'm tired. I'm tired of doing everything. I'm tired of carrying this family alone. I am tired." David's face darkened. He didn't like being challenged, and Ruth's sudden outburst made him uncomfortable. Without another word, he stood up and stormed out of the house. Ruth sat on the couch, burying her face in her hands. She had nothing left to give. That night, David didn't come home until late. When he did, Ruth noticed something strange. He was holding a small ticket in his hand, his eyes filled with an unusual excitement. "What's that?" she asked, exhaustion laced in her voice. David grinned. "Lottery ticket." Ruth blinked. "Lottery?" "Yes," he said, his excitement growing. "This could be our big break, Ruth. People win millions from this. If I win, we'll never have to struggle again." Ruth felt a deep ache in her chest. "David, you think gambling is the solution?" David ignored her. From that night on, he became obsessed. Every little money he got his hands on, he spent on lottery tickets, convinced that one day he would win big. He stopped looking for jobs entirely, convinced that his luck was just around the corner. Meanwhile, Ruth continued to struggle, watching helplessly as her husband sank deeper into his delusions. And for the first time in her life, she began to wonder if love alone was enough to hold a marriage together. David became completely consumed by his obsession with the lottery. Every morning he woke up with one goal in mind: to check the latest lottery results. Every penny he could gather, he spent on more tickets. He was convinced that one day luck would shine on him, and he would become a millionaire overnight. Ruth noticed how much money he was spending on the lottery and became deeply worried. Their finances were already stretched thin, and now David was using what little they had to chase a dream that might never come true. One evening, after coming home from her exhausting double shifts, she sat beside him and spoke gently. "David, you need to stop this. This lottery is not a job. You need to get real work." David sighed and shook his head. Ruth, you don't understand. People win millions from this. One lucky ticket and we'll be rich. Just wait and see. But what if that day never comes? Ruth asked, her voice breaking. We can't keep living like this. I can't do everything alone, David. David waved her off, uninterested in her words. You worry too much, Ruth. Just trust me. Ruth wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She simply sighed and went to bed, praying that one day David would change. But he didn't. Instead, his obsession grew. He started selling household items just to buy more lottery tickets. If Ruth left money on the table for food, David would take it and rush off to play the lottery. The children barely saw their father anymore. When they did, he was always staring at numbers, calculating, hoping. Then, one fateful evening, luck finally smiled on him. He rubbed his eyes and looked again, his hands shaking. The numbers matched. His numbers. His heart pounded. His breath came in short, rapid gasps. He jumped up, knocking over the chair, his entire body trembling with excitement. It felt unreal, like a dream. He had just won $7 million. He could barely contain himself as he rushed home, eager to announce the news. When he got to the house, Ruth had just returned from work. She sat on the bed, her feet swollen from standing all day, while the children were in their room doing homework. She didn't even have the strength to prepare dinner yet. David burst through the door, his face beaming with excitement. I won, he shouted. I won $7 million. I told you. Ruth shot up from the bed, her exhaustion forgotten. Thank God, she cried, rushing to him. We won. David suddenly took a step back, his face twisting in confusion. What do you mean, we? Ruth blinked, her hand still mid-air from where she had been about to hug him. David, of course, it's our win. We are a family. David laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was bitter, mocking. He shook his head. No, Ruth. This is my money, not ours. Ruth's heart skipped a beat. David, what are you saying? I'm saying, he said coldly, that you will be hearing from my lawyer soon. Ruth's mouth went dry. Lawyer? David, you're joking, right? David's expression hardened. No, Ruth, I was only with you because I was broke, but now I can finally live the life I deserve. Do you think I ever wanted this life? Do you think I wanted a woman like you? Ruth felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. A woman like me? She whispered. David scoffed. Yes, you. You're fat, stressed, always complaining. Look at you. Do you think a man with $7 million wants a woman like you? Ruth's hands trembled. David, after everything I did for you? David rolled his eyes. Please, spare me the speech. The truth is, I was managing you. You were never my type. I love women with BBLs, women with hot bodies, women who take care of themselves, not a tired, old-looking woman like you. Tears streamed down Ruth's face as she staggered back. The children ran into the room, frightened by the shouting. Please, Daddy, their daughter cried. Don't leave us. David didn't even glance at her. Instead, he pulled out a $100 bill from his pocket and tossed it on the bed. This should be enough for you and the kids. I'm out of here. With that, he walked out of their lives. David's new life was everything he had ever dreamed of. He moved to a high-end apartment on the island, leaving behind the small neighborhood that had been his home for years. He bought expensive designer clothes, flashy luxury cars, and started living in 5-star hotels. Women flocked to him. Beautiful women, glamorous women. They called him Big Daddy, showered him with attention, and made him feel like a king. He threw money around carelessly, hosting extravagant parties, drinking the most expensive wine, and traveling to exotic locations. He felt untouchable, but the money did not last forever. Within a year, the millions began to disappear. The fake friends who surrounded him only stayed as long as his pockets were full. The women he had spent lavishly on moved on to richer men. One day, he checked his bank account and felt his heart drop. Only a few $100s remained. Panic set in. He had no investments, no savings. He had wasted everything on a lifestyle that was never built to last. With nowhere else to turn, he decided to go back to Ruth. Surely she would take him back. After all, she had always been there for him. She had loved him when he had nothing. She would understand. With his last money, he took a taxi back to the old neighborhood. But as he stepped out of the car, he noticed something different. The house he had once lived in looked new, renovated. There was a nice car parked outside. The children's laughter filled the air. David's heart pounded as he knocked on the door. A few moments later, Ruth opened it. She looked different, healthy, radiant, happy. And beside her stood another man, a strong, confident-looking man who had his arm around her waist. David's throat went dry. "Ruth." Ruth stared at him for a long moment. Then she simply smiled. "Oh, David, you're back." David swallowed hard. "Ruth, please. I made a mistake. I lost everything. Please, take me back for the kids." Ruth shook her head, her expression calm. "David, I begged you. I pleaded with you not to leave. You abandoned us. Now it's too late." David turned to his children. "Kids, it's Daddy." But they barely looked at him. They had grown used to life without him. Tears welled in his eyes. "Please, Ruth, give me another chance." Ruth's new husband stepped forward. "I think you should leave, David." David's shoulders slumped. He turned away, his heart filled with regret. As he walked away, he realized the painful truth. He had once had a family who loved him, but he threw it all away for temporary pleasures. And now he had lost everything.